We're pleased to have back on set Leslie Cutler, who's a licensed psychotherapist. Leslie does her section with us that we call Mindful Moments.
Hi, Julie. Thank you. It's nice to be here today.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you as well.
And it started off really cold.
It did, yes.
Yes.
These winter months can be a bit cruel, and I think we've all felt that the last couple days, but it really got me thinking about how we can use this time of year to grow internally.
Okay.
And I think this is an interesting topic because I think it's so easy to get lost in the craziness of, prepping for these storms, wondering if there's school and this whole thing. And, there's an absolute beauty in winter that I think very few people even tend to notice. I mean, this is the one time of year the ocean is this electrical blue color.
Yeah.
And you can see the lines of all the trees. And yes, there's this barrenness, but there's also so much growth that's happening beneath the surface that we don't see. And I think of like tulips and apple trees. They would never bloom if they didn't have this dark, cold season.
Right.
And, this is same way that we could kind of move this internally as well, that there are parts of ourselves that can bloom during these dark months.
Because a lot of people at this time of year just hunker down.
Yes.
Even their eyes are down all the time. You want to keep warm. There's very little light during the day. You come to work, it's dark. You leave work, it's dark. It can be really challenging for a lot of people. So you've come up with 5 different tips to help through the winter months to grow internally.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the first one, make severe and inconvenient weather into an adventure.
All right. Well,
easy for you to say.
I was actually thinking of this the other day. My kids and I were home, the storm is happening, there's no school, and, my clients are all calling. I'm desperately trying to reschedule everybody. We're doing FaceTime sessions in one room, my kids are screaming in the other. And I was like, whoa, this has got to stop. This is craziness. This is absolute mayhem. And I stopped for a second. I said, I am not required to be anywhere today. Mm-hmm. And if this was a regular day, I would be completely in my groove, running around, doing 100 things at once. And it really forced me to stop and say, okay. And then our power went out for several hours. And it was a little chilly. And, we were all huddled around the fire and we're doing, board games and puzzles. We never would have done that had anything been different. So, there definitely is a way of kind of reframing this and looking at this in a way where, okay, this is a positive. We all needed that rest. We needed that break and we needed that time together. And that's what it gave us.
And sometimes when the power goes out, there's no TV.
There's no
lights.
technology.
You use candles, you read books, and you talk to each other. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty unbelievable. So that's a very sweet part of it. Another thing that I think is really important is to look closely within ourselves to see if we deal with depression and specifically seasonal affect disorder.
Yes.
So this is very big in this neck of the woods up here on the northern East Coast because with the changes of weather, the days are shorter. There's a lot of darkness, and for many people, this throws off their circadian rhythm, which is basically the thing inside us that tells us when it's time to be awake and when it's time to sleep, and it's attached to moods and all these other things. So it's interesting to kind of check in within yourself, and if you're struggling with symptoms of feeling agitated. Just a bit overwhelmed, just a certain sadness, having, lack of motivation, lack of interest in the things that you once did. There are definitely ways of kind of dealing with this. The way to kind of qualify for the diagnosis is to have it for 2 winters back to back.
Okay.
So usually it would start in the fall, and then it would continue until, early spring or so.
Right.
And, the easiest way to deal with this is really through phototherapy, which is Lightbox therapy.
Okay, which is what?
Well, it's basically just a light box that you plug in. You can get it on Amazon. They're, fairly inexpensive. Yeah. And, while getting ready in the morning or getting dressed, just kind of sitting in front of it and kind of letting that take in the heat of that sometimes helps.
Is it a certain kind of light?
I'm not so familiar about, I think it's a mixture of, mirroring regular sunlight.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And
probably
so it
like
just,
sunlight,
and it just kind of brings in, it's interesting. I never really thought that would do much good, but a number of my clients have said within just a couple of days of using that
really
in the
helps.
Morning has been tremendous for them.
That's great. So this when you're dealing with SAD, some of the symptoms can be very actually severe. I mean,
Yes.
it can be angry outbursts, difficult concentrating, suicidal thoughts. I mean, there can be some severe symptoms. So what do you do if you constantly are feeling this way and you don't know what to do about it?
You know, I think it's like prepping for any storm. You know, if you know that this is kind of where you're at every year at this time of, you know, at this time, we'll start prepping for it back in the fall. You know, I have some clients that will, you know, maybe take a low dose of an antidepressant come, you know, September 1st through, you know, April 1st. And then they wean themselves off of it, and then, you know, they're fine through the summer months. You know, if you're not in therapy, that's a great place to be to kind of learn some coping skills. You know, this is different than dysthymia, which is kind of this low-level depression that kind of sits.
Right.
Because the difference is that lasts all year long.
Right.
This is very, very specific to time.
And it's definitely about the season. It's the season of winter.
Yes, absolutely.
And a lot to do with the fact that we don't have a lot of light in winter.
We don't have a lot of light. And, you know, if it is at all possible to budget it in, you know, plan a tropical vacation in the middle of January or the time where you're feeling most vulnerable.
Right. Okay, that's great advice. The third point is celebrate hospitality. Okay.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said this is really the time where we crawl in deep. We kind of isolate from those around us. But this is actually a really great time to rekindle old friendships, to meet new people. I have a friend who every year in mid-January hosts a soup party where everybody brings their favorite homemade soup. She makes all kinds of breads, but everybody is required to bring one friend that she doesn't know.
Oh.
And she sets up her living room with little tables, and you know, we play board games, and it's a great way to meet people.
Right.
And you know, sometimes it might take a little pushing to kind of get ourselves out of, you know, wanting to stay home and curl up around the fire. But you know, sometimes it's a great time to kind of bring people in
together.
as well.
And the fact that you really can't go outside, you can't spread out into the outside, into the porch. You kind of all
all huddled in.
Are huddled together.
Yes.
So you're saying make that a shared experience and make it a positive and do it on purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So highly recommend that.
Okay.
Number 4, I think, is one of the most challenging. And I got to say, I struggle with this.
We've talked about this many times.
Yes.
Yep.
Set aside a day of solitude.
Define a day of solitude. What does that mean?
Even, Julie, set aside an hour of solitude of basically just sitting with yourself. And I think that there's such a universal fear of that. You know, we search for so much from those around us and from material possessions and from things within our world, that the whole idea of going deep inside into our own unconscious is absolutely terrifying. It reminds me of my daughter, who's terrified to go in our basement because she's convinced there are monsters down there because it's dark and cold. And I think people think the same thing, like, oh my goodness, if I dig deep, good Lord, what on earth am I going to find? You know, but there's really a beautiful warmth and hearth in there that we need to attach ourselves to. And winter offers us the perfect time to be able to do that.
It's almost reconnecting with yourself.
Reconnecting with yourself.
Right.
You know, without, you know, and it's hard to find that space and that time to be completely alone. And it's not loneliness because there's no longing for another. It's this very strong awareness of, you know, you within yourself.
Right.
So
that's very interesting, and the environment of the winter gives you a perfect opportunity to do that because you don't even hear sounds outside.
Right.
I mean, you don't have the birds.
Yeah.
It's you're almost like in a cocoon.
Yes.
And so, what a great time to just kind of breathe and almost a rebirth of yourself.
Yes, beautiful.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the fifth one is learn from the penguins. I love little penguins.
Oh,
what
I think
can we learn
all
from
do.
them?
I mean, they're such fascinating animals. And, you know, a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Antarctica for a couple of weeks. Yes.
Wow.
And so I studied a lot about penguins before leaving, and I've always found them fascinating. And I know most people have seen the movie March of the Penguins.
Yes.
I think that came out in 2005. And, you know, it's unbelievable the lessons that they can teach us about life. And, you know, we don't kill penguins. So when I was on the ice, you know, they'll basically walk right up to you. They'll stand on your boots. They'll waddle up to you, and they'll just stare at you. You know, I mean, they're very, very sweet creatures. And the way that they take care of their young is absolutely beautiful. So I was thinking about my trip there, and I was thinking about penguins and kind of what we could learn from them.
Right.
And, you know, it's just interesting when you say the waddling, because there's something about that slow movement that
Yeah.
allows a certain amount of mindfulness.
Yeah.
You know, they notice what's around them
Yeah.
because
It takes them so long to get anywhere.
yeah, because they're, you know, they're kind of slow moving.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting because their courting rituals are also very interesting as well. You know, so they bow to the ones that they love.
Oh, they literally bow?
They literally bow to the
Oh.
ones they love, which is, you know, such a respectful,
Yeah.
kind of beautiful acknowledgement. And it's just so interesting because they all look the same, but
Right.
yet they all know who the one is that they love.
Oh.
You know, and also the way that the mothers kind of feed their children teaches us so much about nurturing
Yeah.
and caretaking.
Yep.
And it was just interesting. I mean, I know that in the coldest and darkest of days, they all huddle together
Together, yep.
tightly. And I think there's something to be said about that. You know, in our coldest and darkest times,
Yeah.
it's when we bring those that we love and care about close to us,
Right.
and we hold tight.
Right.
And that is where our strength can come from.
Right. They become our cloak.
Yes,
Yeah.
they become our cloak.
Yeah.
And finally, the one thing that I always try to remember about penguins is, my God, they can play like nobody.
Yeah.
You know,
They have fun.
They have
Yep.
so much fun, and they have such energy and, you know, playfulness about them in the way that they approach life, despite these really, really harsh conditions
right.
that they're in.
And they don't complain.
And they don't complain.
Learn from the penguins.
Learn from the penguins.
Okay. This has been great. So using winter months to grow internally, you've given us some 5 really good aspects to concentrate on. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Julie. It's wonderful to be here.
It was great. We'll have you back very
Thank
soon.
you.